This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. Parents in general want their children to succeed, and that typically means enjoying a better life than they did. Yet when we talk about the success of other people, the focus often rests on the individual, someone who, quote, pulls themselves up by the bootstraps to attain that better life. That is one way of telling the story of what economists call economic mobility. It's a subject that's under active study and debate. But if we put the bootstraps narrative aside, the practical question is, what does it actually take for kids who grew up in low-income families to become adults who out-earn their parents or the generation that raised them? A new initiative at St. Louis Magazine called the Economic Mobility Lab is exploring that question and potential solutions. And joining me now to talk about that project is St. Louis Magazine Senior Editor Nick Phillips. Nick, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Elaine.
So your latest story is titled How One St. Louisan Found Something Rare, Upward Economic Mobility. Now, we're going to meet that person in just a little bit. But first, Nick, help us to understand this term. What does economic mobility mean?
It means a lasting and consequential shift in individual wealth. Mm-hmm. And wealth means a lot of things itself. It's how much money you're making from your job. It's how much you have saved, how much you have invested. And it's also big ticket items that you own, like a home or a business. And so what we're interested in is how people move up in those different areas.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different ways to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And move up and stay up.
Correct.
Yeah. In your reporting, you introduce a few interesting ideas from a Harvard economist named Raj Chetty. And Chetty has studied economic mobility by looking at decades of tax data from the U.S. Treasury. And basically, that's data that can show where people live by income level, and it shows that over generations. Chetty presented this data during an event in St. Louis this past October. Let's listen to a moment from that presentation, which involved a large map. It showed areas of low economic mobility in St. Louis, marked in red.
Within St. Louis, there's an enormous amount of variation in children's chances of rising up. There are a large set of neighborhoods in the darkest red colors. Those are places where kids growing up in low-income families really face tough odds in terms of rising up. But there are other places that are just a few miles down the road, as you can see here, where kids growing up in low-income families actually have among the best odds of rising up in the country. And that's a pattern we see not just in St. Louis, but pretty much in every city in America. There's a lot of variation in rates of economic mobility at a hyper-local level. This is not about broad differences between states or cities. You know, you can drive 2 miles down the road and it's like you're going from Alabama to Iowa in terms of your chances of rising up in the income distribution. That simple point, I think, is very important for two reasons. First, it shows us that this problem is tractable. It's not that you have to look to a totally different place, a totally different economy, look back to 1940 to find a period when people had good chances of rising up. You actually just need to look a few blocks down the road in your own city.
And that was Harvard economist Raj Chetty speaking at an event this past October, hosted by Washington University and the James S. McDonnell Foundation. And I should note here that the Economic Mobility Lab at St. Louis Magazine was created through a grant from the James S. McDonnell Foundation. So, Nick, economist Raj Chetty, his point about divisions on the hyper-local level, that sounds very familiar to conversations that we've been having for years in St. Louis. You know, things like the Del Mar Divide, differences in the services that are available between the city's north side and the south side. But from your perspective as a journalist, what stood out to you about this data? What did it show you about St. Louis that maybe was new?
That data, what I did with it, because of the history of St. Louis that you just mentioned, I filtered the map that they created to find out where essentially low-income African-American kids grew up and out-earned their parents. And there weren't many census tracts where that happened. But there was one out, it's mostly in Chesterfield, kind of where at the junction of 141 and Highway 40. And I was like, well, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Then I saw another piece of research that Professor Chetty and his colleagues have done. And that looked at something called cross-class interaction. And that's basically the social mixing of people from different ends of the wealth continuum. And so what they did was they used a bunch of a crazy amount of Facebook data to look at high schools and ask, okay, in the social circle of a kid whose family was below the median of wealth, what percentage of their social circle is going to be kids from the other side, from the wealthier side? And Parkway West High School happened to score really, really high on that metric. And that happens to be in the same census tract that I noticed before, as I just told you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you have a connection to Parkway West, right?
Me personally?
Yeah.
No.
No? Oh, okay.
No.
I think I had misunderstood something that I saw before. But that is a connection to someone that you ended up speaking with, a real-life example of upward economic mobility. His name is Nehemiah Colyer, and he's with us now in our studio. Nehemiah, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. It's a pleasure to be here.
So is there anything that stood out to you about what Nick just said?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just kind of like you said, the mixing of the social classes. A big thing for me is just opportunity for students and children of kind of all economic levels, and so being exposed to different ways of life and being exposed to different opportunities can do nothing but help with kind of that upward elevation. Being appreciative and really taking advantage of that opportunity that's given provided for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now I want to back up a little bit so that we can get some of your biography. You are 27 years old.
Yes.
You work as a physical therapist.
Yes.
And in 2024 you earned a doctorate degree in that field. Congratulations.
Thank you.
When Nick first reached out to you, wanting to write about you and your story as an example of upward economic mobility, what first crossed your mind? Like, were you down immediately?
With that, I got a message from Nick, and at first I thought it was just going to be, I'll answer a few questions, and they'll do the story, and maybe he'll reach back out to me, and then it kind of turned into what it is now. At first, I talked with my mom and dad about it. And we were like, this would be a great opportunity to kind of, share our story and to really give a highlight into, our perspective on this topic. The big thing is that we wanted it, really wanted to, be respectful with it, have it done in the right way. And with working back and forth with Nick, we were in, constant communication and getting the story together and really providing a lot of, helpful information and telling the story in a manner that really respected how, the gravity of the topic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nick, you describe Nehemiah in your story. You write, Nehemiah Colyer may not be the best example of how a kid from a lower income milieu can get a lift from a higher income one. In some ways, according to those who knew him, he elevated Parkway West rather than the other way around. Why did you choose Nehemiah as the subject for this story?
Great question. He did, like you said, he brought so much when he made the transfer. I don't want to tell tales out of school, but he was at the Riverview School District when he was in grade school, and when he made the transfer to Parkway West, he brought so much with him in terms of character and intelligence and everything. And that's not from what I know of him. That's from what people who know him say about his character and about how hard he worked and everything like that. Mm-hmm. But I thought he was an interesting. I think he's an interesting guy because he not everyone thinks about what happens in their life very hard. Mm-hmm. But you could tell, like, when you talk to him, he thinks about it.
Yeah. And what made you say yes? Have you been looking for an opportunity maybe to share your story?
Not actively looking for an opportunity, but with Nick reaching out, I thought it was a great opportunity to just kind of tell our story. Me and my brother, with transferring from Riverview to Parkway West, I feel like it's can really, shed light on this issue, as well as also giving a lot of insight to, what, providing kids with the right opportunity, the right environment can really lead to in the future. Mm-hmm. And so, with talking with my family, we just figured it was like this would be a, great opportunity to just tell your story and hopefully, give, some good information or also inspire as well.
What is your parents' story? Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and, the economic situation that they were working with in raising you and your siblings?
Yeah, my mom and dad, they're both born and raised here in St. Louis. My dad, he works at an agricultural plant, and my mom, she's a pharmacy technician. I know she did go to take some schools at St. Louis College of Pharmacy and Health, but she didn't go to a four-year university. But they met here in St. Louis. They had me and my brother Josh, and they raised us to be like very hardworking. So they instilled values of taking school very seriously. They raised us in church, Radiant Life in Christ Apostolic Church, and so we were born and raised there. And so they just did a really good job of one, keeping us on task, keeping us involved in the community with sports, swim classes. They just really wanted to keep us on the straight and narrow and really help us develop as we aged.
Does the label or the tag of lower income, does that reflect, what you felt, what you experienced? Does it resonate with you?
I would say me and my brother, we were, fortunate. We didn't want for anything growing up, but we definitely weren't wealthy by any means. My mom and dad, they really did a good job of, our finances, kind of keeping, me and Josh shielded from that. It's like, whatever the finances are, they are what they are, but we're going to take advantage of the opportunities that we do have. And so they, did a very, very good job with that. Mm-hmm.
We're going to take a very quick break here. We're going to pick up with this conversation when we come back. Our conversation today is about economic mobility in St. Louis, what data can tell us about where that mobility is happening and why, and getting a first-hand perspective on that. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.
Welcome back. Let's return to our conversation about economic mobility in St. Louis. That's the central topic of a new effort by St. Louis Magazine's Economic Mobility Lab. I'm here with senior editor Nick Phillips and Nehemiah Colyer. Nehemiah is the featured subject of Nick's latest article and an example of upward economic mobility. Nehemiah, before the break, you were talking about what kind of circumstances you were growing up in, not needing for things necessarily, but also being very aware that things were not coming easily. And a big part of the story, Nick, that you have written in your story, Nehemiah, has to do with the high school you attended. And this is something that you both mentioned earlier. So in 2013, your parents applied for a transfer for you and your twin brother. And at that time, again, you were attending Riverview Gardens. And that transfer was a lottery system, which you all won. And that meant that you enrolled at Parkway West. This was a really big change in your life. and also in your career goals, as I understand. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, with that, it was a really big change. I grew up going to Riverview Gardens, me and my brother, and I made a lot of friends, a lot of memories, being at Riverview Gardens. I learned a lot, but with my mom and dad, they wanted to, explore other options with Riverview not having their accreditation at the time. They're like, let's look into, what other options, what other schools that we can, attend. And so we ended up getting the lottery and going to Parkway West. That summer going into the school year, I'd say it's a little stressful. I feel like most, high school kids there, growing up and they're thinking of, oh, I'm going to, play this sport, or I'm going to have this, class with my friends going into high school. And for me and my brother, it's like, okay, we're going to school like way across town, and we have to start from the ground up. But my mom and dad, they did a lot of, talking and encouraging us, saying, hey, this is a great opportunity, make the most of it when you go out there. And I just tried to, take that in stride. I was like, all right, I'm here. Like, I'm going to make the most of the situation. Like, there's great opportunity at the school, and so I'm just going to dive in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you and your brother have conversations about this? Like, there is what your parents wanted for you, but was there a point that you two came to together because you were going to go together? Or was it just you?
I would say we talked a little bit about it, mostly about just the transfer in general. It's like, oh, we're not going to be with our friends. I know my brother's, more introverted, and so he was also like, oh, we're going to a different school. Okay. So he's really big go with the flow kind of guy. And so we did talk back and forth, but it wasn't anything like super extensive or profound or groundbreaking in the conversations between the both of us. Yeah.
Nick, your article highlights Nehemiah's time in high school as a period when he was building connections. You describe these connections in the way that economists see them as, quote, cross-class interactions or the day-to-day mixing of people with different incomes. Why is that mixing important, based on the research findings?
There's a couple hypotheses about why that's important. One is that a lot of employment is referral-based. So it's like, my uncle has this company. He's got an internship this summer. Do you want to do it, et cetera, right? That's the employee referral piece. The other hypothesis, though, is that if a life choice is normal in your social circle, you're more likely to make it. And that's where, feel free to kick it over to Nehemiah, but when he got to, he got to the end, was getting toward the end of his undergraduate career at Central Methodist University. And the prospect of grad school came up because he knew he wanted to be a physical therapist, but he didn't have it. The way he said it to me was he didn't have a blueprint for applying to grad school. Mm-hmm. Well, the Parkway West community, it's extraordinarily that's a routine. It happens all the time, and so he got a lot of. I think he leaned on. Well, he can tell you, but go ahead.
Talk with us, Nehemiah, about some of those connections, like specific connections that helped you get to what you had characterized as a blueprint.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple names that come to mind. Also, listed in the story as well. Miss Kristen Witt, she was someone I really leaned on when applying for grad school. So with typing all of my, essays for my, PTCAS application, she would read over them and kind of make edits so that I could submit them. One thing also, too, I not listed in the story, but she sent a essay prompt over for scholarships, and so she really encouraged me to kind of reach out and type up an essay to apply for the scholarship that I ended up getting that helped out with schooling costs a little bit as well. Mm-hmm. Two, also, friends that I've made. Another one, Andrew Engelmeyer. He's in New York now working business consulting, but me and him, we would talk all the time and would really, kind of push each other forward. Another one of my friends, Jamie Poppin, she's in a physical therapy school in Mizzou right now, actually in her final semester, I believe. And so just, having that community and kind of people that are pushing forward too, it kind of gives you a little bit of motivation to continue pushing forward as well.
Mm-hmm. What you have described, Nehemiah, what strikes me is the specificity of these, connections. And, what you're describing, I think, sounds intuitive and familiar, right? Like we've heard that line. Mm-hmm. It's not what you know, it's who you know. So like this theory of economic mobility, what is it that distinguishes it from, the idea or practice of networking? Like it's not just about, meet more people who are rich and powerful.
Well, that's exactly. Yeah. Hey, have you, as someone said, recently, have you tried having wealthy friends? That is. I don't think that I would change that framing. To there's a lot of things you could draw from this story and from Nehemiah. I would change that framing a little bit to a different audience, which is people who are above the median in wealth. What can happen when you open up and encourage and include? Like that's something that I want them to think about. Mm-hmm. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. There are multiple audiences for this.
Exactly.
Right. Is there advice, Nehemiah, sort of looking back on what you've experienced and also being at this stage in your life, advice that you would have for parents or for young people, especially students who are navigating decisions that are like the ones that you and your brother and your parents made?
Yeah, definitely. I think it kind of goes back a little bit to what I was saying at the start. It's just, taking advantage of, opportunity in front of you. So, there, things that come up in life and, everyone's situation is different, but, putting your best foot forward, kind of having a gratitude for, all right, this is, the situation I'm in. What can I do to, kind of put my best foot forward? Really try, utilizing the skills that you have, leaning on community if it's there for you as well. I always say it takes a village. It takes a village. So really just, buying into the fact that, hey, we have, opportunities and resources out there. Let's do, the best we can to, take advantage of that. And it might be a sacrifice for now, but hopefully in the future, we see the payoff for those sacrifices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nick, the research on economic mobility, the examples that you write about suggest we're talking also about literal mobility, moving.
Yeah, right.
Families should consider moving to a new community, a better school district to give their kids a better chance. But is moving the best way to be economically mobile, or, is there research into people who can find this mobility while they stay, in their homes, in the communities that they have come to be part of?
Yes, and there is a paper that just came out from Professor Chetty and the economists at Opportunity Insights at Harvard that looked at Hope 6, which is a federal program in which they invest a lot of money revitalizing public housing sites. And they figured out that if they put money into a public housing site that was a near kind of prosperous or flourishing neighborhoods, then the kids who grew up in that site ended up doing later in life a lot better than kids who were similarly situated but the public housing site was not revitalized. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So so that's a place-based investment, but it's not unqualified. I think the implication from that is if you put that investment in an area that's surrounded by poverty, I guess, then it might not work. But according to that research, it does work if it's near more prosperity.
Mm-hmm. If you look at economist Raj Chetty's map of economic mobility in St. Louis, we can see a lot of areas in red, especially communities in North St. Louis. And, there's been a history of redlining and disinvestment. And then recently, there's the tornado. And in October, Jason Purnell, the president of the James S. McDonald Foundation, he shared his reaction to that map, and he said that people often think about those red areas as problems. His argument is that these areas are, quote, where our opportunity is and where our potential is. What do you think of that, Nehemiah?
I definitely agree 100%. There are, I think I was talking to Nick about this during one of our interviews, but there are like bright minds and amazing people all over the city. And a lot of that time, it's just, having the opportunity. And so I feel like the solution is kind of figuring out what can we do to kind of, raise the city as a whole rather than picking specific areas. You shouldn't be discounted or have an opportunity taken away from you just from the area that you grew up in or the circumstances that you dealt. Everyone should have fair and equal opportunity to those opportunities to help improve their lives going forward.
Mm-hmm. And in our last minute here, Nick, your article that features Nehemiah is kicking off St. Louis Magazine's Economic Mobility Lab work. And you, along with your colleague Samir Knox, you're looking for a lot of potential stories out there. What are your hopes for this project?
Oh, we hope everyone who's listening to this has an idea and emails us. We're looking at a lot of different things because a lot of things, come back to, a lot of things affect your economic prospects in life. Big ticket things like education, schools, right? Big ticket things like owning a home. But even things about like how you get around.
Yes.
And things like that. Like
mobility in that one too, right?
Like literal mobility.
Yeah. And how can people reach you?
Oh, stlmag.com. And we have a tab for the Economic Mobility Lab. You could also subscribe to Sarah Fenske's newsletter, which is the daily. We have a lot of newsletters.
Yeah. And the last question, Nehemiah, for you, 30 seconds. How are you doing better than your parents were?
Okay. Right now, after, graduating from grad school, I'm working as a physical therapist now. That's opened up a lot of doors, a lot of opportunities, and I just really get a chance to, give back to the community, really push patient care as well as make a good living doing it. So,
Nehemiah Colyer is a St. Louis example of upward economic mobility. He's a physical therapist living in St. Louis County. Nehemiah, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And Nick Phillips is a senior editor with St. Louis Magazine. His latest story is titled How One St. Louisan Found Something Rare, Upward Economic Mobility. Nick, thank you for being here too.
Thanks.
This episode was produced by Danny Wissentowski.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.